Krause Gallery to do my show. Now this was going to be my first one-man show in London, and it was with the legendary Ziggy Krause, who is still to this day a great friend of mine, and I adore him immensely. He was one of the great underground galleries, the alternative galleries in London at that time. And so we recreated my biomass installation that I had done at the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford, and for which we had some problems with what I call over-participation. So at the Ziggy Krause Gallery, I tried to work on the problem of over-participation that tends to happen sometimes, where people get too enthusiastic and they can damage the artworks, quite frankly. You know, what is the limit of participation? What is the, you know, this is why in Lidge's works she was very concerned about, about what would be correct participation as opposed to incorrect participation. So for Ziggy's gallery, I created this crossing stream, which is a pond of water that you had to cross to get into the gallery, right? And then once you were in the gallery, there was all this grass. Your shoes had come off. You were walking this grass, and there was all these participation works. But it had the effect of dampening the over-enthusiasm of the participants and bringing them into a new environment in which they would then sort of slow down. Relax, slow down, right? Well, Harold Zeman, apparently, Ziggy told me that Harold Zeman came 4 times to my show and loved it. And he eventually wrote, he invited David and I to both to document it. He wrote me a letter saying that he wanted to recreate that environment as long as he could find a way to protect the delicacy of my works, right? And so that's when it was suggested that we build a pavilion, and we came up with the idea of this sort of Southeast Asian longhouse, right? And it became the Great Red House, the Rothaus, of the People's Participation Pavilion at Documenta 5. Following that, I was invited to be in the delegation, the first young people's delegation to China during the Cultural Revolution, right? And it was mostly made up of Oxford and Cambridge students with the Society for Anglo-Chinese Understanding. I had been asked to join it by Saku as well. And I was the only Yank, I was the only American in this, and therefore I'm actually the first American artist to visit China since the 1949 revolution. And I was there specifically to write a small paper on the effects of the Chinese Cultural Revolution on Chinese landscape painting. And when my Chinese hosts learned that that was why I was there, they took me away from the group separately and had me meet all of these Chinese landscape painters for private interviews and discussions. And I had my Super 8 film, and I made it. That was an absolutely wonderful time. And I came back from China in August. It was about 45 days I was there, and I came back to the invitation from David Thompson for David and I to do an exhibition called People Weave a House in the ICA. Let me explain. People Weave a House was based upon the weaving of a house. Alistair McAlpine gave us 5.5 miles of plastic tubing. When I was in China, I was looking for new forms of participation art, and I knew what to look for because David and I had already been through Southeast Asia, and there's identifying factors of where participation event is. You can see a participation event beginning to happen. Well, I was talking to one of my translators, and there's this habit in China, because in the north they speak a different dialect than they speak in the south. They very often cannot understand each other. China's such a big country. So what they do is they write on their hands. So they'll say Wang, and they'll write Wang on their hands with the strokes. Every Chinese person can see the strokes and say, well, that's 9 strokes. That's what that means, right? Well, my Chinese translator had said the word Xing. And Xing means star, like Hong Xing means red star. He had said, oh, star, right? And instead of him doing the 9 characters for the word star, the 9 strokes of the word star, he literally drew a star. And because I was looking at it obliquely, I saw it from the side, and it was, to me, it looked like an over, under, a 3-dimensional pattern. And when I went back to my hotel room and I looked at what I saw, it was indeed a 3-dimensional weaving pattern. So I said, my God, this is a great idea. Why don't we make a factory for weaving stars? So when I came back from China, we made this proposal to the ICA, saying we want to make a factory for weaving stars, and that's what we did. That's why we had the 5.5 miles of plastic tubing. I invented a weaving jig and all that, right, you know. David led the cultural team in which he did big character posters. Guy Brett did a special photo exhibition of weaving around the world. So again, it was a participation show that was done largely by Artists for Democracy, right?
So, I mean, you're interested in technology, and so was that sort of, does that relate to your banners in a way? Like kind of starting with that
in every way.
process?
In every way, you know, there is a balance between old technology and new technology. Interestingly, as long as we broach the subject, Karl Marx once said that new technologies do not unseat old technologies. All right. New technologies overlay old technologies. All right. So there might be a good example is when the United Nations UNESCO tried to redesign the Tonga, which is the ox cart in India. They wanted to redesign it for the sake of the Indian peasants, and they did 5 prototypes, and every prototype broke down in the field. And the only one that didn't break down in the field was the original Tonga that had been carved out of wood with wooden wheels and wooden axles, because the very roughness of the technology itself was better suited to the soil of, the dry soil of India, right? So in following technology, I wanted to use old technologies like weaving, but using modern materials as well, and then to take them to a new stage for what is suggested.
So maybe we should move on to the banner.
Let's move on.
There is the banner, or an image of it here, but it's much better in real life, so do go and see it by the cafe if you get a chance later. It was created in 1974, so perhaps you could, well, we're skipping 2 years, but...
Well, it's interesting. Well, let me say that after the ICA, I kept on thinking there was a problem with participation art, was that the institutions were not sympathetic to it. It was before its time. Lydia had a hard time in Paris getting a show, for instance. I don't know, did she have one show? She had one show for all that time in Paris, right? You know, the story of Elio Ortesica, he came and did a show in London at the Whitechapel, the beautiful show at Whitechapel, couldn't get another show. Went to New York, couldn't get a show. Elio's life is quite tragic, you know. Lydia deserved to be recognized, all right? You know, I know that David and I have had our struggle of being recognized, but it seemed to me after the ICA that there was an institutional problem. So I went to study metalwork. I went to study in a foundry. I was trying to find something else to do. In any case, the moment of change was in May 1974 when the studios that David and I shared caught on fire by a cigarette match that had been improperly gotten rid of by a guest at our studios, and it literally burnt down. It burnt down our studios, and David and I both lost many works. I lost 26 major pieces and all that, and it was just a total setback. We were already so poor, and the only good thing about evening was that Carlyle Reedy, the American poetess, turned up to see this crowd outside of our studio, this Chinese crowd cheering the fire, this Chinese fire drill going on right then, you know, and the fire department there and all that. And Carlyle had actually come to visit us, but she had come dressed as a phoenix. Can you believe that? And I saw, Carlyle, and I hugged her, and she was wearing this sort of phoenix outfit, and she looked so forlorn. She said, I didn't realize, I've never would have worn it. I said, no, we needed it. But there was a phoenix, because in the need to recreate my works, I had the force majeure, as they would say, to actually go and create a new form. Now, interestingly, we used to collect, if David or I used to sell an artwork, we'd often go and buy an older Chinese work or such. We'd often go to this antique store, Mr. Ying's, on I think it was on Neal Street. And I don't know if you know, but once you bought a couple of things from an antique shop, they take you in the back room and show you the good stuff. Do you know this? Well, on this occasion, David and I went there, and Mr. Ying led us back through this beaded curtain to show us the good stuff, right? And on this occasion, the good stuff was a painting, a Ming Dynasty painting that covered the wall, right? And it was of a stream rushing by some bamboos, beautifully painted, almost like in a Nanga style, big thick brush, full of energy, full of passion, right? But what was singular about it was that it had been cut up into 8 scrolls. And I looked at it and I said, well, how much is that, Mr. Ying? He said, it's 800 pounds. Well, we didn't have 800 pounds all year, all right? But it's not a bad price. But I looked at it and I said, Mr. Ying, I must know one thing. Was it conceived of this way? And he said, what do you mean, what was it conceived of? I said, was it conceived of this way? Was it conceived of on 8 scrolls? He said, oh, no. It was cut up to smuggle out of China. And it hit me like that, my God, what you can smuggle out, you can smuggle in. This is the great guerrilla art form. And I thought to myself, how